Mike ordered that at a restaurant once, right? Instead of deviled crab.
Yes.
He said deviled, and we thought that was funny. And then there's that story about
Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Yeah, I think Kathleen and Chris were in college, and they gave, you all gave Chris some money to get us a gift card to Ruth Chris Steakhouse, which was very expensive. And somehow Chris got in charge of going to get the card. When he got there, he thought, oh, Mom and Dad don't need this much money, so he cut back on the amount. Anyway, so after, when we got home, Kathleen said, did you have enough money for your dinner? And we said, well, it was a la carte, so it cost a little more than we thought, and we just added a little to the pot. She said, a la carte? You mean everything was served with ice cream? Thinking a la mode. Yes, there have been a few.
Oh, so it's over here.
We should wrap this up.
We got a movie.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kelly, any goof by
Oh,
Kelly?
Kelly? Well, we all had fun with Kelly, I think.
She was an actress, wasn't she? Wasn't she a show business person with all her flamboyance?
Oh, yes. When Mike was in Tokyo, we sent Mike a videotape of Kelly dressing up in my nun costume that I used in a play I was in, Sound of Music at St. Pius with Meredith Shortle. Anyhow, Kelly dressed up in that, and she did Sister Act, sang, and we sent that to Mike when he was in Tokyo. She was probably about 8 or 9 years old then, and he enjoyed that a lot.
Do you guys remember world events when you were growing up, or any other time that were significant? Do you remember where you were when JFK was shot, for example?
Definitely,
Yeah.
yes.
Martin Luther King, I remember that one. I was at U of D High making fundraiser phone calls, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get a phone line. I kept trying and trying, and someone said, an important person's been shot. We're just starting now to get details. So MLK assassinated in Memphis. John Kennedy, I was at Fort Knox as a soldier.
That's really when we started dating, 1963, November.
I was doing training in a frostbite of all things, talking to soldiers, giving them some education, and somebody came in from the outside and said, President Kennedy has been shot. So I said, wow, we don't have a radio here. I went out to my 1960 Ford Falcon and turned on the radio, and for the next hour I'd come in every 10 minutes giving the guys the latest and Kennedy, and of course that went very quickly. I remember...
So you felt that? It was an emotional kind of time for everybody?
That was the
It was
Catholic,
awful.
Catholic president, and we liked him.
Well, young and vivacious, and his family, and I was working at the insurance office where Dad first saw me. But anyway, it came over our radio at work that he had been shot. They didn't say he had passed away right away. He had been taken to the hospital. And then actually the fellow who was Oswald, who was supposed to be the shooter,
Lee Harvey
Oswald, was then shot in the police station by some Jack Ruby, who was
a nightclub owner.
Yes, he was so upset by JFK's death that he got into the police station where there was high security, and when they were pulling Oswald out, he shot him. But
incredible.
I was in high school. I graduated in 1960, and that was the year JFK was elected. But when he was running for president, my girlfriend's sister, Joanne Sheehy's sister, was a member of the Young Democrats. And JFK was coming into the Detroit Metropolitan Airport, and they were all going out to greet him. So Joanne and I and one other friend went out, and we got first in line, and there was a rope holding us back, you know, from when he came in. Well, the rope broke and the policeman gave it to me and he said, hold on to the rope. Well, as soon as people started surging, you know, they started surging toward the car, and you think he got shot later, but at that time, I think security was not nearly what it was then. And he got up on the hood of his car and gave a little speech. And we were probably only 30 feet away from him. And he was just so...
So you could hear him even though he wasn't
Oh, yes,
mic'd
we-
or anything like
right,
that. Yeah.
right, we could hear him.
Look at the difference today in security, and that would never happen today.
But anyway, he was very handsome, tan, you know, very friendly. He was really something. And actually, so
I had seen
he
him.
won, even though he had, nobody wanted to elect the first Catholic president. They thought the Pope would come over here and,
Dictate what happens.
right,
I saw him a couple of years earlier because I was a copy boy at the Detroit News, and my job was to help the reporters and photographers get their stories. So I went to a hotel 6 blocks from the paper, and Kennedy was there making a speech, and the photographer would shoot a roll, hand me the roll, and I'd run back to the Detroit News office and get that printed for the next edition. Later I saw President Gerald Ford when he came to a Ford plant, and I got close to him. I risked saying something. I said, I hope you know that a lot of people are praying for you. And he said, thank you. They were difficult times in some respects.
You're talking about when Gerald Ford took over from Nixon?
Yeah. We haven't even talked about something called Vietnam, where we lost 50,000
Yeah.
Yes.
Americans.
Yeah.
You go to Washington, see the monument, and the names go on forever. I was in the Army before Vietnam, so I did not have a fighting role. I had a desk kind of job as a communications expert and a news writer. But that was a bad war.
But didn't your reserve group get split in two? And
Yes.
and your friend Dick Lightbody was in the other group, and the other group ended up being called up for Vietnam. So Dad was fortunate. But yes, in those days you had to be drafted, or you rejoined, or you got drafted, or you could serve in the reserves, but everybody really, all the boys had to do some kind of duty. Although the exclusions were Uncle Claire never had to, because he got married young and started having a family, and he was still in school too.
Yeah.
He was going
I
to law
got a
school.
little emotional in that last part because I cry watching card tricks.
Yeah.
I am over emotional on some things.
Or if he looks, if
Well,
he looks in the mirror at his bottom teeth, that makes him cry.
yeah. Was Gerald Ford just somebody you really admired?
Well, he was from Michigan, and he was a former U of M football player and a good family man, and we admired him a lot.
And did you feel the country was just coming apart at that time or something? Or?
A little bit.
But
with
Watergate was
Nixon.
different than Vietnam, but you're saying Watergate for you was a
Those
difficult...
different matters.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
But you
Gerald,
associated with the era.
Nixon was a good president,
Yeah.
but then he made that major mistake of having some people sneak into the opposition
he was
headquarters.
strange though.
And all he had to do was, I made a dumb mistake, I'm sorry. And he would never have been impeached, he never would have been knocked out of office.
Yeah.
It went on forever, and it's often not a matter of the crime itself, but it's the cover-up that proves so harmful.
Also, Gerald Ford was his vice president. He was well liked by both sides, by Democrats and Republicans. He did not get a fair shake with the press because he was a football star at University of Michigan. He was an athlete, but he stumbled once. What?
Physically.
He stumbled once getting off a plane or something, they brought that up all the time, you know, and they made him look dumb and
Like a buffoon.
Yeah,
Very,
like a
very
buffoon.
unfair.
and he just didn't deserve that, you know, as they do with any. It doesn't matter really what side, they'll make you look ridiculous sometimes. But so he got defeated when he ran for re-election.
Just going back to the 60s when Robert Kennedy was shot, did you feel the same gravity that you did when John Kennedy was shot, or was it different for you?
I was in the
Not as
Army
much,
again.
but-
That was during summer camp, and I was in Puerto Rico or Panama at about 2 a.m. or so, and I guess I had my little radio with me at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. And I said to the guys, Kennedy's been shot. The Kennedy brother has been shot, and they don't think he's going to live. So I remember where I was then. You don't forget things like that. An assassination in a kitchen of a hotel
Yes.
as he tried to get out there and avoid the press and get into his car. This guy was waiting for him.
Robert Kennedy was, I mean, the Kennedy family was so well known, and I think most people really liked him. Robert Kennedy, though, was not quite as, I don't think he was as quite well liked as Jack Kennedy. Well, he had a different role. He was the head of the Justice Department then, and he was investigating the mobsters and different people who didn't like that. So he was, I think, a little stronger-willed and
Yes.
not quite the humor. They all had humor, but it was scary because you thought, you know, they're trying to kill members of the Kennedy family.
Somebody, a
And,
lot of people said, the President, John Kennedy, appointing his brother Attorney General, isn't that showing favoritism? Giving him a new attorney, not much out of law school, that job. And his response, Bobby Kennedy's response was, you gotta start somewhere.
They all, I mean, you couldn't help but like them, you know, really, all of them. And he was married to Ethel Kennedy, and I think they had 9 children. So, of course, the original Kennedy family had 8 or 9, I don't remember, but it was a big family. And then, who was the one who was the last
Ted.
brother? Teddy Kennedy, yes. He got himself in trouble. He wanted to run for president, but while he was married, he was on Chappaqua Island in
Chappaquiddick.
Chappaquiddick.
Chappaqua was the Clinton home, was it?
Oh, yes, you're right.
Chappaquiddick. He
Chappaquiddick.
was driving a helper,
He was
helping
drunk.
their campaign, and he was driving her home, and went off the bridge, and the car went under, and he, a good swimmer, saved himself. And it wasn't for hours that he said, you should go back there, there could still be someone in that car.
He didn't get help. He just saved himself, and then they sat on the side of the lake wondering, what do I do, what do I do? You know, it's going to ruin our family or this or that.
Gotta
In the
motivate
meantime,
politically.
she could have been saved. They said that there was still an air pocket left in the car, and but he didn't. I think they paid off the family or something, and he was never charged, or if he was charged, it was very minor.
The press was different in those days compared to now. If someone did something at this moment, someone in the room might have a phone that is a camera, and he could take a picture of the offense
Oh, right.
and get it to
All
the
the
New York
cameras
Times
everywhere.
immediately and Associated Press, and then it goes around the world in 5 minutes. That could happen. Then, of course, somebody would do something wrong, and they say, he's the president. We can't talk about infidelity of a president. So a lot of things were hidden. And now we have an approach where everything is open right away.
Well, especially the Kennedy family was protected. We didn't find out till years later that JFK had all these, he was quite a womanizer, had all these affairs and stuff. So they protected him in those days, but I don't think you could be protected nowadays. Anyway.
What about when you were just talking about just the pain? Oh, you gotta go.
Last one?
Yeah, last one?
The pain the country was going through in Vietnam era. But I also remember in the early '80s when Paul Volcker was Federal Reserve president, and he was pushing interest rates up.
Oh,
And
yes.
I just remember it being I could feel the stress as a 11 or 12-year-old.
Really?
Yeah, and I just wondered if that felt like a dark time to you as well in the early '80s, the economy and.
Well, when we moved to Atlanta, it was 1983. You were in 8th grade, so that would be about right.
It's not
And-
surprising that you're saying a Volcker thing bothered you when you were 11, because as Mom says, when we moved to Atlanta, there was the child killer. Remember
Oh,
this?
well, that's not interest rates, though.
No.
Yeah, but I remember Wayne Williams was a child killer.
Yes.
Well, that was your reaction when we said that we were going to move to Atlanta, and you said, "Oh no, they're killing all the kids there. We don't want to move there." He was.
Well, and Mike, though, another child killer. This is not going to turn into a downer, but
Birmingham.
Michigan.
Or something?
Yes.
Birmingham, Michigan.
Yes.
So I was driving around with Mike in the car,
I think delivering
and we heard
papers
a
with
news
you.
report on a car radio, and Mike said, "I bet the parents feel just terrible." I said, "Mike, of course they felt terrible. When you lose your son to a murderer, you feel terrible." He said, that wasn't the question. He said, "I'm thinking of the parents of the person who's doing it." And I
Yes.
said, "Oof, this kid's a little heavy. For his age, that's a surprising
Yes, to feel sorry for the
observation."
killer's parents. Yes.
Do you guys remember the Ypsilanti Strangler?
No, I don't think I
No,
do.
I just saw that in the news the other day.
Really?
The late 1960s in Ypsilanti.
Was that
Yeah.
a student at Eastern
He was
Michigan?
strangling young women.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
I thought I'd throw it out there as a current event when you were.
Well,
But if
one
you have to
quick
go-
thing
yeah,
about the interest rates, though.
Yeah.
When we moved to Atlanta, we went from a 7.5 interest rate, which nowadays,
It's
is
high.
high, to when we bought the house on Martina Drive, the interest rate was 12.5%. And a
That
few
Jimmy-
years
Jimmy
later,
Carter's time?
it went down to 9.5, and we refinanced thinking, oh, that's so much better. So, true. I mean, 12.5% interest rates for a house mortgage was awful. We haven't been back there since, especially the last few years. So, I think when we bought our first house in 1965 on Rutherford, we had like a 4.5 or 5% interest rate, and that was considered pretty average. So,
That was in Detroit, of course, for that overpriced house, $15,200
yeah,
For
our
a
first
home
house cost.
with 3 bedrooms,
It was a
a
bungalow.
finished back porch, a finished basement with a nice rec room. Did we tell about Anne Marie's reception?
Oh, I don't know.
They didn't have a wedding reception at a restaurant where it cost a lot. So we said, we got a fancy basement. Why don't you have your 65 people in our basement?
We talked a little bit
I
about that
think
one.
we did.
Oh, yeah, we did, about Uncle Carl. Yep. Yep.
And
Okay.
you can't.
Gotta
Go.
have to go.
Yeah, I have
Okay,
to
you
get a
guys
haircut.
did great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Yeah,
For
much.
making
Yes.
this possible.
Yeah.
Yes, and cut out anything that you
Oh,
think
yeah.
isn't.
Oh yeah.
Try and clean up your mother's act.
Yes.
Yeah.